Who was that masked man? Hi, my name is Bill Alberti, and I'm going to be doing a small poetry workshop and reading some of my original poems for you. This is being shot from the Kingston Senior Center. So let's get started. There are two kinds of writing in the world, only two kinds. Only two kinds of writing. Whenever you pick up a pen, you are writing either in one genre or you're writing in the other. The first one is prose. And you know prose. Prose is novels, books, nonfiction, fiction, writing a letter to your grandmother, writing a newspaper column. And prose can be very big. This is a Dan Brown book. It's got 461 pages, lots and lots and lots and lots of words, lots and lots of words. So prose can be very, very big. It can be very big. It can be anything you want. It can be 10 pages, 20 pages. It can be 400, 500 pages. That's prose. There is no limit. The other type of writing is called poetry. And poetry is different than prose. Poetry is an art form. Poetry is language condensed. If you think of boiling something down to its very essence, that's what poetry is. Poetry looks different, very different from prose. Prose is big and expansive, and poetry has been whittled down carefully, concisely, with many revisions to create a piece. I showed you prose. I'll show you a poem of mine. I don't know if this reads backwards or not. I'll read it to you, but this is a poem. That's a whole poem right there. And as you know, there are poems that are even shorter. The haiku is like a couple of lines. That's it. Let me see if I can give you a demonstration. I came up with this idea to try and explain it. So this is a flashlight, of course, and this is a piece of paper. So if you look at the light when I shine it on, I try to imagine that as prose. It's big. It fills up the whole page. This is poetry. It's shorter. It's more condensed. Look at the intensity of the light. Look at the intensity of poetry. And if you keep that message in your mind, you'll kind of an understanding of what poetry tries to do. It's the consolidation of language, good language, careful language. Poets work with words, and they're very important that they find just the right words for the poem. And revision is a major part of it. So we have prose, we have poetry. Poetry is an art form. What is poetry? Trying to define poetry is like trying to define love. Many poets have many different definitions of it. But what I've said is basically it's trying to concise language. There was a poet that kind of wrote a poem about it. He said what poetry is. He said poetry is like something in your mind that you're trying to share. It's trying to reveal what you're thinking, how you're feeling about something, getting it down on paper and just sharing it with the world. A poem is a part of me you cannot see. You see my head, you see my hind, but you can't see what's in my mind. So I must write that part of me you cannot see. I take a pencil, paper, pen, and write what's in my mind, and then you have a poem to read and see. I've given you part of me. I love that little poem because it does explain that what you're doing in poetry is you're sharing your thoughts, your take on the world. There are many poems about flowers, many poems about roses, but it's your specific look of what that rose means to you, how you're feeling at that moment. And there's a saying that good poets borrow from other poets and great poets steal from other poets. And what they mean by that is simply that sometimes you get an inspiration by reading poetry. If you want to write poetry, you need to read poetry, other people's poetry, as much as you can. You'll find that you have certain poets that you like, certain poets that appeal to you, and maybe that'll affect your own writing style. You don't know. But in doing that, you're realizing that all the different shapes that poetry can take, all the different themes that poetry can take. Poetry does not just have to be about nature. Poetry does not have to be about only things you like. Can you write a poem about something you don't like? Of course you can. How many of you like broccoli? How many of you don't like broccoli? Which group could write a poem about broccoli? Both of them can. Because an important part of poetry is showing how you feel about the subject you're writing about. Try to reveal that in your poem. Now, to be a poet is not as easy as you think. You have to have certain tools. This is my little poetry toolbox. Just like a carpenter would have to have a measuring tape, a saw, a hammer. A poet needs to have you ever seen one of these before? It's called a pencil, of course. I use the pencil because, as an example, because it has two ends. The writing end, of course, but it also has the little tip eraser. An eraser is very important when you think of poetry because you're constantly revising. You're constantly cutting out words. Remember the size of prose, the size of poetry? The way you cut out the words is what tightens your poem, brings it down into its important essence. Of course, you need paper. So these are two tools that most of you have at home. Obviously, it's a little more than that. There are a bunch of techniques that you would learn, just like an artist would have to learn to use their colors, their techniques. A poet would have to use, and I don't know that you can read this, it might show up backwards, but it's a long list. Sensory images, sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, sound devices, alliteration, onomatopoeia, repetition, line breaks, rhythm, rhyme, hyperbole, simile, metaphor, personification, symbolism, vocabulary, allusion. All of those are techniques, literary techniques, and sensory techniques and sound devices that you can tap into and use them in your poem to shape your poem and make your poem into a poem. So the tools are pencil and paper and a little bit of knowledge and understanding and practice with some of these particular devices. You don't have to use them all. You just have to try and incorporate the ones that seem to work with your poem. Now, I rattled off a list of at least 17 techniques. Only one of those techniques is rhyme. And unfortunately, a lot of people believe that poems have to rhyme. True, earlier poems did rhyme. Many poets used rhyme. Today, some poets rhyme, some poets do not rhyme. And many poets do a little bit of both. I write poems sometimes that rhyme, but I probably have a few more poems that don't rhyme. So rhyme is only one of the 17 techniques in poems. It's a sort of a sound technique. The way I like to explain it is this way. My wife loves to wrap presents. She's very good at it. I built her a wrapping table in our basement, and she takes whatever she's going to wrap, and she goes down there, and she spends time on the wrapping paper and just folding it right, and the Scotch tape, and the way she folds it, and then maybe adding a ribbon. Me, I like the gift bag. It's quick, it's easy, and it looks nice. It looks nice. It does not take as much time as my wife did with wrapping the present. But think about it. What is the present? The present is what is most important. It's what's inside of these that's most important. It's not the wrapping. Yes, a very polite people will say, "Oh, what a nicely wrapped gift." And then they open it and enjoy the present. But they also could open my gift bag and go, "What a nice gift." So it's the extra effort that you put into rhyming. Some people have a talent for that. I could never wrap like my wife does. She's an expert present wrapper. I could never do that. That's maybe why I tend towards the gift bag all the time. And I think that's the same with some poets. It takes a little extra talent to be able to come up with a rhyme. It's a lot more work. Robert Frost believes you have to rhyme. Modern day poets, many don't rhyme. So you have to understand that rhyme is not the essential part of what a poem is. It's really putting what's in your heart into the poem, creating that gift. And then how it's wrapped and what techniques you use is up to the poet. Let me begin with the poem, the short poem that I showed you. It's from think it's the third book, the third chapbook that I put out. It's called Shadows and Silhouettes, which kind of gives away. Shadows and Silhouettes. While I rocked on the porch early one morn, staring into the emptiness of my open notebook, the smallest bird visited, the sweetest nectar feeder, and I heard its buzzing hum, and spied it silhouetted in dawn's dappled light, casting a dark shadow onto my blank white page. Head, needle, bill, body, crisply outlined, but rapidly vibrating wings recorded only a soft haze, defying and eluding capture. Receiving a poem is like that. So I'm kind of saying that that's sort of like what a poem is. Part of it comes to you, you get ideas, and some is fuzzy, and you have to try and work with it. But it's a condensation. What was I writing about? I was writing about something that happened. Poems don't have to be about the whole world. It can be about something small that just happened to you, and you happen to notice it, and it only took a few seconds. And it was a wonderful experience. What can poems be about? Poems can be about anything. Persons, places, things. Poems can be humorous. Poems can be serious, sad, happy, joyous. I have poems in almost all of those categories. I've been writing for a long time, and I've been reading poems for a long time. Other people's poems, learning a few techniques here and there. So I'm going to share today a few of my poems, and we can talk a little more about poetry as we go along. I'm going to do something that's going to scare many of you. I'm going to put on this hat. I'm going to pick up my poetry book here. This is the second book I wrote. It's called Resonating Timber. The title of this poem is Nemesis. Nemesis, which means arch enemy. All around me are Red Sox fans, but I wear my Yankees hat, remembering my 50s team in the Bronx, when Dad took me to see the Mick and Whitey pitching lefty to Yogi, secure in Bobby Richardson's defense, and Roger Maris's big bat, able to negate any deficit for Casey's team. I never saw my home team lose. I thought baseball was fixed like wrestling. I don't wear my cap for the prima donnas who take the field today, driving up ticket prices, demanding millions for nose candy, beautiful or fancy people, making it hard for a dad to take his kids to a game. So, princes of New England, next time you see a middle-aged man wearing a Yankees hat, don't rush to judgment. He might just be suffering from nostalgia. It was something that happened to me. I mean, I was born in Brooklyn, and my dad would take me to Yankee Stadium occasionally. And whenever we went, the Yankees seemed to win. But when I wear my hat up here, I've taken some guff from my friends. And that thought made me put together my thoughts and express what's in my heart and express that idea in a poem. One of the things you need to know is if you think of a heart, your heart, that's the first thing to think about. Let me see if I have a symbol here. All right, so here's three things. Again, maybe showing up backwards. A heart. You want to make sure that when you're starting to write about something, explore your feelings. How do you feel about it? And find a way to show that somehow in the poem. Second, think of your hand. The hand has 5 fingers, and the 5 fingers remind me that we have 5 senses. We have sight, we see things. We have sound, we hear things. We have touch, we have taste, and we have feel. Feel and touch would be the same thing. Sight, hearing, smell, taste, and sound. So explore that when you're writing a poem and say, are there any sounds in this situation I'm writing about? Is there any taste? Is there a smell? And if so, then try to put that into your poem in some way. And the last one that I have, these are just short reminders to help you, is to ask the question, like what? Like what? And like what will lead you into one of the literary devices, major one, which is simile and metaphor. Trying to explain what you're thinking about, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and try to get it across to your audience, your readers, by showing it with something else that it relates to, something that they may be able to relate to easier. So you want to create images, but you want to also somehow explain those images so that people can see it. If you described a piece of broccoli as a small green tree, a piece of broccoli looks like a small green tree. You get that image in your mind. That's a visual image, and you get color, and you can see that broccoli because you're giving the image that people know, a small green tree. Okay, let's move into another poem. Place. This is a place poem. I went to Paris, and when I came home, I had all these images of Paris, and I wrote what's called a litany poem. A litany poem is really a list. It just runs like a list of things. So this is a litany poem about the place called Paris. It's called Impressions de Paris. City of lights and love, life and death by the Revolution, guillotine, Les Miserables, ancient city on the Seine, Ile de la Cité, Baroque buildings, Pont Neuf bridges, an erect set tower, Napoleonic Romanesque arc de triomphe and defeat, Sacré-Cœur and Notre Dame, cathedrals and churches, Catholic city of Gothic gargoyles and garlic, fragrant parfum and sewer stench, savory bistros, restaurant cuisine, and chains of fast food, curbside cafe leisure lunches, walking baguettes, flowers and bunches, vin and veal, croissants and crepes, fromage, fish and fries, pastries and fruits, city of spiky-heeled fashion, scarves, shades, and cell phones, black leather jackets, bags and boots, fur sleeves and collars, ambling struts, Champs-Élysées attitude, multi-ethnic city of colors, cobblestone streets and speeding boulevards, Rue de Claire, food markets, the old and the new, Bibliothèque Georges Pompidou, Moulin Rouge, Pigalle porn, Persian beauties can born, pointy nose and fishnet hose, high cheekbones and big dark eyes, thick wide lips pout to cry, fraternity and crime. City of kings and emperors, beggars and mimes, your history runs deep like blood seeping down into the metro crypts and concierge cells where pickpockets, panhandlers, and musicians dwell, amidst grunge and graffiti. City of mustard, monuments and musees, carousels and cloisters, Bastille bricks and bones, corner bars, fast-moving cars, Montmartre artists, saints and sinners, liberté, fraternité, égalité, long live the evolution. So there's an idea. You could write about any places where you've been. Try to keep the images in your mind and sit down and try to capture it. And then revise. I have many revisions before a poem to me I'm satisfied to some extent. And even years later, when I look at a poem that I've written, I wind up taking my pencil and crossing out a word or two or changing a word. And say, why did I use that word? I should have used this word. One person says your poems are all finished the day you die because you can't revise it anymore. So revision is a very important part. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Revise in terms of poetry. Let's look at another poem. My dad was a World War II veteran. He enlisted in New York. They sent him to Africa. He fought Rommel in Africa, and then he followed Rommel and fought Rommel in Sicily, and then he thought he was going home, and they sent him to England and trained him for the Normandy invasion. He landed on Omaha Beach with the 1st Division, and fought his way through Paris, the Battle of the Bulge, and then finally into the very first liberation of a town in Germany. Along the way, he collected 3 Purple Hearts. He was shot in the arm, he had grenade shrapnel in his calf, and then finally he had an eardrum blown out and was basically deaf without the use of hearing aids. When I think about him, it's amazing the battles that he fought, what he saw. He had PSD, very rarely talked about it until he get up there in age and felt it was important to share it. So this is a poem that I wrote when I was down in Myrtle Beach on vacation, and I went to one of those souvenir shacks. And the poem is entitled Extinction. Displays of tacky sundries, shark's teeth, shells, keychains, sand dollars, starfish, wind chimes fill the souvenir shack on Pier 14, Myrtle Beach. In the corner of the shop stands a spinning wire rack, displaying black baseball caps, their foreheads and fronts embroidered with military branch insignias and golden words distinguishing our country's wars of service: Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. But when I turn the rack, I cannot find my father's war. It's missing in action. The one which earned him 3 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star. The one which robbed him of his hearing and for years turned his sweet dreams into moaning nightmare memories. He's passed on now, as have most of his generation's band of brothers, once deemed the greatest. No longer able to spend their money on trinkets and souvenirs, it appears their war has become unmarketable, their represented sacrifices unprofitable, and they themselves, dare I say, extinct. This was my dad's hat, which he wore an awful lot, and I keep it as a reminder of him. And on Veterans Days, Memorial Days, I always take it out. I think we'll go to a humorous poem, lighten the load here a little bit. Like many of you, I'm sure, we've suffered some back pain in our lives, and some more serious than others. So this was the result of having dealt with some back pain. It's called the Bad Back Blues. Yesterday I did too much. Today my back's in real pain. Yesterday I bent so low. Now I gots to use a cane. Had to see a chiropractor. He pretzeled me, gave me a pill. Went to see this chiropractor, left with one big hefty bill. Today is not a good day, 'cause I gots the bad back blues. Today it ain't no good day. Did some work I should have refused. See my muscles all in spasm, running up and down my spine. Oh, my lower back's in spasm. I'm all twisted like a vine. Now I won't lift a finger, of that I am emphatic, 'cause if I lifts one finger, it might become sciatic. I won't allow no x-rays. Why take unneeded risk? I ain't going for no x-rays. I know it's bulging disc. The pain, it sure is throbbing. Feel like I'm in a vice. My lower back's a throbbing. Think I'll go and get some ice and drop it in a tall glass with lots of whiskey in the mix. Then toss it down real fast. I'm putting in the fix. Little humorous, so have some fun with poems too. So things in our lives can generate poems, and take some notes on it and see what you can do to work it in. Poems can be fantasy. They can be about little things in your life. This is another fun poem, a fantasy poem. I was in my family room, sitting in the chair, thinking about what am I going to write about, and I started looking around the room at some of the objects in the room, and I came up with this total idea for a fantasy. It's called Things Are Going to Change. My family room is filled with freeloaders who share my home, my life. They need to step up to the plate, fish or cut bait, pull their own weight. I'm talking about all of you, fake Tiffany lamp, bust of Will Shakespeare, Angel with the sweet smiling face, as if you'd ever plucked that harp. None of you help pay the bills, take out the trash, offer to cook a meal, set the table, do the dishes. Helga, you just stare from your picture frame, never contributing to conversations, giving advice, or even taking sides in a family squabble. Even you, man with guitar, my daughter's gift made in her wire sculpture class, you pose like a prima donna rock star, never playing a riff or strumming a chord. Buddha and Nefertiti, all you have ever done is lean your marbled weight against a row of heavy books. Well, I guess that's at least something. And plastic jade plant, you are worst of all, requiring constant dusting, never volunteering to vacuum or clean a toilet. Well, things are going to change now. I'm taking you all with me food shopping. You, Tiffany, can take a deli number and stand at the counter line, your black cord trailing in front of the meat case. Helga, you can ride in the shopping cart and check the dates on the coupons. Buddha, you waddle over on your knees to the videos and pick out a spicy romance. Willie, wipe that smirk off your face and go weigh these tomatoes. The rest of you can help bag and carry groceries. And just remember, if you don't like my plan, on the way home, I'll drop you at Salvation Army. Just a fun little thinking, and I'll show you, it is in stanzas. The stanzas and the lines are short. It certainly looks like a poem. There are different genres of poetry, as there is narrative poetry, which tells a story. There's lyrical poetry, which is just descriptive. And I find when I'm doing a public reading that certain of my poems work for a public reading because the people can't see it on the page, but they can hear it. So I like to do the humorous poems. I like to do the poems that are story poems. But let that be known that I also have a lot of nature poems, poems that you would sit with and you would look at and read and sort of absorb it from off the page. And it doesn't work as well when you do it in what we call a performance poem. So different kinds of poetry. Family. I'm going to do one about my mom here. This is one of the rhyming poems. Like I say, I have many that do not rhyme at all, but this one wound up rhyming. It's called Once Upon a Time. I wished for a fairy godmother and a cricket conscience guide, 7 dwarfs to be my friends, and a Gretel by my side. I wanted to whistle while I worked, and weave straw into gold, wear slippers made of glass, and never grow up or old. I hoped to ride inside a pumpkin, build a house of sturdy bricks, climb up a magic beanstalk, and be wise to witches' tricks. I prayed to sleep in a bed just right, grow a long nose made of wood, sprinkle a path of breadcrumbs, and wear a Red Riding Hood. I learned lessons from the fairy tales. Never lie, always obey. Do not talk to strangers, and heed what parents say. I mostly was a good boy, rarely cried or complained, kept to the straight and narrow, not easy to sustain. I miss Mom reading the storybooks, her good times and her laughter, her magic and love remembered, lives happily ever after. A sweet little poem about my mother reading to me and the early nursery rhymes that we've had. Nostalgia is a great thing to tap into for poetry. Last night, my wife and I were playing Trivial Pursuit with one of the old trivial cards, and the name Don Diego de la Vega came up. Do you remember who Don Diego de la Vega was? That was Zorro. And when I realized, I knew it came out of my head. I said, where did that come from? I know that was Zorro's real life name before he became the superhero Zorro. And so I've already started thinking, that might be something to tap into. That might be a poem to write about Zorro. I used to watch that show all the time. What shows did you watch? Maybe you could write a poem about one of your favorite shows. Think of the words that would go with that show. Create a vocabulary list and then try to work it into a poem. Poets work in many different ways. For every poet there's a different method that they use. So I can't explain that, but I could just say read a lot of poetry. That's the most important. Be willing to revise your poems. Be willing to cut words, shrink them down. Go for the very best word you can find. Remember to use your senses. A very famous poet named Donald Hall once said, it's very hard to write a poem where every line has the exact number of syllables. So I took it as sort of a gauntlet cast down. I said, I'm going to try and do that. So I picked three syllables. I created the word trillable, meaning try meaning three, and syllable, trillable. And I created it based on my singing voice. My mother early on discovered that I had a decent voice. And the nuns kind of concurred because my elementary sisters would put me in the choir all the time. But I was very shy. I know it might be hard to believe, but I was a very shy kid. And so I had to make a deal with Mom because she always wanted me to sing her favorite song. So I wrote this poem, Trillable for Mother. As a child, I would sing songs for Mom, most often her favorite, Danny Boy. She knew that I was shy. Our deal was I would sing for her friends from the steps leading to the attic. From behind partition wall, I would sing in a voice which trembled just for her. Most of those lines, I think there was one in there that had 4 syllables, but every line in there has 3 syllables. You don't see it on the page because some words are a 3-syllable word, like partition, and others are I would sing. Each word is a 1-syllable word, 3 1-syllable words. Anyway, I'll give you a little taste of my mom's favorite song. Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the roses fallen. 'Tis you, must go and I must bide. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valley's hushed and white with snow. 'Tis I'll be here in sunshine or in shadow. Oh, Danny boy, oh, Danny boy, I love you so. And so her favorite song. That's for you, Mom. God bless you. Rest in peace, my dear. I'm going to end our session today here with another poem, nostalgic poem, that I think many of you can relate to, based on, well, I won't tell you. It's called I Remember Mama, Suffering from TV Nostalgia. I hate reality television filled with bachelors, survivors, sharks, star dancers, and day court judges. I long to return to those thrilling days of yesteryear and spend my evenings engulfed in the gunsmoke bonanza of riflemen, rebels, and lone rangers. I miss my news delivered by trustworthy correspondents named Reasoner, Brinkley, Cronkite, and my laughs delivered by wholesome comedians I love, like Lucy, Carol Burnett, and triple named Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore. I want to make room for Danny, Mouseketeers, Howdy Doody. Listen to Guy Lombardo. Sing along with Mitch and watch Lawrence Welk point his baton and in a thick Polish accent introduce Sissy and Bobby. Most of all, I miss Ed's variety show every Sunday night right on this very stage. Broadly casting comedians, impersonators, plate twirlers, ventriloquists, acrobats, and upcoming raw talents like Tom Jones, Barbra Streisand, Elvis, and the Beatles. Would I be willing to exchange my modern big screen colored TV for rabbit ears and black and white, featuring animals like My Friend Flicker, Mr. Ed, Rin Tin Tin, and Lassie? You bet your life. Have a wonderful day today, and what I'm telling people now is stay positive and test negative. God bless you.